Coming up on Mount Hermeneutics, morality. Did we get it from God, or is it just merely a social construct? Well, we're going to jump waist deep into this, so keep it right here. You're listening to Mount Hermeneutics, where three Marines give their perspective on God, faith, and spirituality with a heavy lean on the divine council worldview. This is not your grandma's Sunday school, nor is it always for the Christian faint of heart. Nothing about who we are or what we say make us experts. But you better believe we'll have a take, and perhaps it won't suck. Just so you know, I get a lot of feedback that people like that. They like our just bickering antics because it makes us feel like we're real and we're friends, and
they're gonna love this one then.
Or that we just
Matt, you ignorant slut.
that we're dudes on the back porch drinking whiskey, talking shit. Like that's the point.
That sounds like I want to hug. I want to like cuddle with you. That's like
yes.
Yeah, I'm willing to be Little Spoon. Keep that voice going. Feel so safe.
Hey guys, how was your week? How was your holiday?
It's Thanksgiving, man.
Yeah. So as of this recording, what was it, the 26th of November? This is the Sunday, the weekend of Thanksgiving. Personally, here at the Bibbs house, we did it on Wednesday because, you know, as your children become adults, they have different obligations and things of that nature. And they have significant others and, you know, husbands and whatnot. So in order to, you know, let them be able to do what they do and still have time for us, then, you know, I thought it was pretty cool that we got to do it on Wednesday. Not to mention on Thursday, I drove Aubrey and her husband to LAX because they were flying out to show the baby to the grandparents in Samoa. So that was...
It's the first time that the other grandparents really get to see the baby. Nice. Nice. That's a cool Thanksgiving.
So super, super cool there. This weekend, so Friday, we went up to Los Angeles and went to a Matt Rife concert. So me and Delana got dressed up and went to the Dolby Theater, the same theater where Chris Rock got slapped by Will Smith at the Oscars.
Fun fact.
Yeah. So in fact, he kind of opened, so he's like, "Hey, is this crazy? This is the Dolby Theater. The Oscars is held here." In fact, Chris Rock was slapped right here. So a fun fact about the Matt Rife show is that it was 3 days after they tried to cancel him for the Netflix special. And so he came out on fire, you know, immediately. That's awesome. You know, first show, and basically he said, "No, I will not apologize ever for telling a joke. I'm not into domestic violence." They make it sound like I jumped out of the TV and like started smacking people's wives around.
It's so dumb.
You know, he's like, it was a joke.
Yeah. I feel like if you know, obviously our content and Matt Rife's content's a little far apart, but if you weren't already a fan of Matt Rife, just his willingness to stand against cancel culture and over rotations is enough reason to become a fan of a guy, right? Maybe you don't even like his humor that much, but at least, you know, support his willingness to stand and refuse to apologize for something that needed no apology. Like, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, for sure. I mean,
if comedians can't tell jokes, what's the point of being a comedian?
He's like, "Look, I do a show for an hour. Not every joke's gonna land with everybody, but you know, so keep listening, because, you know, in an hour you might find something you do
right. I mean, right? Look at what we do. I'm sure not everything that we do lands with everybody when they first tune in, right?
No,
hopefully people stick around, and, you know, you might disagree with one, two, all three of us, but, you know, hang around and you might hear something you like, or you might learn something, or, you know, maybe we'll make you laugh. Who knows?
Yeah, it's usually my first comment, like, "Hey, thanks for coming, thanks for stopping by, and you know, check us out again."
Right. Yeah.
Pretty please.
Give us another chance.
Right. Yeah. So you can get at me at Instagram at Super Dre. And Brian, what's up, man?
Hey, Dre. Hey, everyone. I'm Brian. You can find me at thethirdhelix.com. Yeah, I had Thanksgiving too. It was tasty.
Attaboy.
Yeah.
Brian is hilarious. Like you think the first time we're listening, you're like, oh, this guy's very brief and to the point. And then you find out he's not. He's only like that when it comes to like social greetings and whatnot.
I'm to the point. I sometimes I have multifaceted points.
Clearly explaining what your past week and seeing your family and having Thanksgiving was not that.
Well, I saw Napoleon.
Yeah, I did too. Took my son to see it.
What'd you think?
I liked it. I didn't have a lot of expectation. I had seen some early criticism of the show that it was bad. I saw a comment by Ridley Scott that even the French hate the French because he got so much flack from French people about his representation of Napoleon. I thought that was funny. It was different. I didn't expect it to be quite so personal. And, it was more of an intimate look at Napoleon, more of the guy versus the battlefield commander. I'm aware that there's a little bit of some inaccuracies. My son, for those that don't know, is a massive history kid. He's 19, but that's his thing. It's specifically European warfare history. He's all over. And he's like, look, Dad, he goes, it was all right. Napoleon never once charged with a cavalry unit. He goes, he was in combat with infantry units and with his field artillery units, but never on cavalry. And I was like, oh, okay. So spoiler alert, he's on a horse in the movie, right? Like,
it's so aesthetic. You gotta have
also spoiler alert. Well, he had to like enact that David painting. What I'm talking about,
right? Where he's crossing the river,
on the horse.
Yeah, or the crossing the Alps.
Yeah. But I thought it'd be funnier. Just wasn't as funny.
There wasn't much humor.
It'd be funnier.
There was very little humor.
Yeah,
I think I chuckled a couple of times, and that was
as it turns out,
he's not the guy from Bill and Ted's.
Well.
He actually kind of is.
Eat the pig.
Nobody showed up with a phone booth.
Nope.
To take him to do
They cut all that out.
Kip
fuck
and
it, I'm not watching
LaFonda.
it. I'm not watching that movie.
Kip and LaFonda were not in this. No Uncle Rico, no Pedro.
Nope.
No llamas. It was just some French guy doing a lot of killing. It was just
but I enjoy it. I thought it was worth the 2.5 hours. I'm glad I saw it.
I thought it was so much longer.
So they say that Joaquin Phoenix is one of those silly method actors. So I imagine he would be impossible to deal with while filming. I mean, dude believed he was Napoleon.
He walked around thinking he's like, I am the emperor. How dare you speak to me like that? Yeah.
So I think
that was another one of the criticisms, was that he was too old to be young Napoleon, but the movie spans his entire life.
Yeah, I mean,
so it's like, for a point, he's young Napoleon, but then he's like middle-aged Napoleon, then he's like, older Napoleon. So come on.
Right.
I thought
it's like saying a young actor can't play an old dude.
Right.
Like, yeah. I thought it would have been really cool if he cast Russell Crowe as the Duke of Wellington. but he didn't.
Just to bring back Gladiator. Yeah.
just to have a rematch. And
but no, I liked it. And then I after that, because it triggered me and my son watching historical fictions together, or whatever. I had him sit down last night and watch Kingdom of Heaven. He had never seen it.
I love that movie.
Nice.
Yeah.
The director's version is awesome.
I didn't put him through that the first time. I don't think that's fair for a first watch.
It's a different movie, and it's really a much better movie.
Yeah. Maybe someday I'll see the Snyder cuts. I don't know.
The Snyder cuts of Kingdom of Heaven.
Yeah. But yeah. So that
spoiler
was my
alert for Napoleon. Little known fact, although I'm surprised it isn't better known, that the movie doesn't get into. The doctor who did his autopsy cut off his junk. I've sold it.
Where did I see that?
And it's been getting passed around by collectors for the past few centuries. I don't know where it is now, but
that was in the Netflix special of Freud.
Was it?
Yeah. Yeah. The dude had it. The occult guy had his junk in a box.
That's so,
you guys got the JT, the Justin Timberlake joke there, right?
Oh, right. I got
step one.
You have to code a really small hole in the box. That's what I hear for Britney Spears. So, I mean,
ouch.
Yikes.
Poor JT.
Good thing he can dance.
Poor little fella.
We went there. That's we're doing that now.
Hey, that's what we do on the show.
All right.
People pay for premium content.
I suppose this is my fault.
I blame you completely. You brought it up.
I did.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what are we talking about today, guys?
Well, so I mean, first of all, I want to, we had quite a bit of action on our YouTube channel. So thanks to everybody. I didn't see the names specifically, but thanks to everybody that is engaging. And there was some wholesomely, some wholesome disagreements with some of our takes, and I thought that was cool. Part of me wanted to get into that, but I don't think it makes sense to try to, imply or understand. I'm talking about my context. I don't know what your actual name is, so that was your handle. Loved all of your feedback, and we're going to try to get to this and respond to it. But it kind of caused Brian and I to go back and kind of dig back into the moral argument. And for anybody that listened to the last week's episode, Brian kind of laid out the different primary arguments for Christianity, the cosmological, the teleological, and the moral, and the argument of consciousness.
I wouldn't necessarily say the primary arguments, because a lot of people bring different arguments. I laid out
the four that you liked the most,
the arguments that I find most persuasive, and
fair enough.
So, like, if I was not a Christian and I asked 20 Christians what the best argument for Christianity was, and they all told me the ontological argument, I would probably not be, if that's all I had to go on, I would probably not be a Christian. That isn't to say that some people don't find that persuasive. People I respect make that argument and swear by it. I'm not seeing it. I don't like the ontological argument. I think it's kind of silly, but
that's how I feel about the moral argument.
Well, all right. Well, that's a good start. That is a good start, because I think that it's integral, and it's foundational to Christianity and theism itself.
Well, so let's play with it a little bit. So, kind of early spoiler alert, or whatever you want to call this for the listeners. These types of conversations have a tendency to get wildly verbose, bordering on esoteric, and definitely what I would call a wizard's duel. So Brian and I chatted a little bit before this show started, and we're going to do everything we can to keep this more layman. If anybody thinks that we didn't do a good job of that specifically, let us know. Let us know if we're trying to talk at a level that makes this too hard to follow, or if maybe we're talking, past each other. Maybe we're out of our own depth and we don't know it, and we sound like idiots because we basically turned into a In Living Color episode. For those that know
Oswald Bates.
Just let us know. Give us some feedback about that. Also, it's important that we not get too wordy or be too low level, that we're not covering anything at an intelligent level. So we're going to try to tiptoe that or walk that tightrope, if that makes any sense. So given that, Brian, why don't you restate the moral argument, and let's get ready to rumble.
Sure. And I actually think I have the opposite view of this. I mean, the moral argument is as basic as it gets. Morality is essentially it's an obligation to behave a certain way. To whom are you obligated? Is it solely to other people, or is there an authority greater than man to whom you're obligated? If it's purely man-made, then it really just boils down to a matter of preference. It's just that either murder is objectively wrong, or it's just that we don't like murder. I don't think anybody would argue that murder is wrong simply because we don't like it. Most people Well, I think everybody intuitively would agree that murder is objectively wrong. The Nazis were objectively wrong. Antebellum slavery was objectively wrong. For that to be true, there has to be a standard against which we're measuring behavior, by which to determine that it's objectively wrong to do those things. That standard is the nature of God himself. And I realize this is very quick and to the point, and people are going to argue about this, but we'll unpackage this as we go. But if we decide that God doesn't exist, then morality evaporates into a preference. And so
yeah. So and I think that's, I mean, it was quick and to the point. And I think that is somewhat my counter to, or my problem with this as an argument, right? So I guess there's two different things that we have to address here. One is morality in general, and then morality as it relates to an argument for the existence of God, right? Because that was how we got here, is this presentation that if morality exists, therefore there must be a God, some kind of odd philosophical equation, right?
Yeah, and to add to that, I will be the first to acknowledge that based on the moral argument alone, like if we don't take any other arguments into consideration, no other evidence, if we're only just going by that, it may well be true that morality is nothing but a social construct. But nobody can actually live that way. Like embracing that as your belief, it leads to absurdity. Like, a room full of atheists watching a news story about like a child predator, everyone in that room is gonna be disgusted and agree that person should be punished, that preying upon children is wicked, objectively so.
Hopefully.
And really every human interaction is predicated on this assumption that right and wrong are real and they matter, and there's a standard of behavior to which everybody ought to know they are accountable. And if you disregard it, then you're wrong, and you deserve punishment. You deserve to be excluded from society and locked in a cage, depending on how extreme your departure from that standard is. We all know this frames all of our political discussions, all of our debates over social issues and geopolitics and economics, and our every interaction is predicated on this idea that it matters. And if we decide that objective morality doesn't exist, then all of our indignation about people being wrong as we see it just kind of evaporates, and it kind of becomes farcical. So yeah, and I don't expect all that to go unchallenged, but I'm setting that up for you guys to challenge, and I'll address them as they come.
Well, my first thought is, one, morality is, I mean, my position is that it is a social construct, right? But it's a social construct that has a premise, or has a starting position. And I believe, actually, I made a comment. This is a little bit circuitous, but bear with me. So I made my requisite political statement at Thanksgiving dinner, right? And I'm sitting there, and my mom's to my right, and my cousin is to my left, and his wife was sitting on the other side of him. And Andrew was in front of me, and I forget how we got on the topic. And I was talking about libertarianism, and I was quoting the article that Penn Jillette authored about, how I became a libertarian. And I recognize he's no longer a libertarian, but he was at the time when he wrote the article. And I was talking about, any law that you make has to be enforced by the point of, at the threat of violence, to include taking a life. And essentially you boil that down that says, if you believe in a law, you have to be willing to kill somebody to enforce that law. And I kind of did the whole if then, chain of speeding ticket, refusing to pay it, bench warrant, refusing to be arrested, resisting arrest, getting locked up, all these things, right? And it's all with threat of violence and ultimately willingness of a police officer to end your life. And so I said, look, so here's the problem. We have a whole lot of laws that aren't based on the premise of preserving an individual's rights to liberty. They're all about moral opinions. And I said, and at the end of the day, morals stem from religious beliefs. That's just kind of where they come from, right? So I do agree that that's where it kind of comes into play, right? If you think about any kind of moral requirement, it tends to stem from a religion of sorts, right? But that religion can be atheism, by the way, because we've said on this show before that, we're in agreement that atheism is its own religion. It's just, a non-theistic religion based on, in its name, but
it's
the
a worldview
behaviors
with its own values.
But it's very, but those that ascribe to atheism are quite religious in their following an adherence to their philosophies and concepts, right? But that's my point, is that there's a specific moral standard that atheists follow that are purposefully non theist,
not logically consistently, but sure.
Well, that's a different issue, right? It's
the very issue we're discussing here, though.
One could argue that religious morals are inconsistent, right?
Well, because they have grown over time. Well, we have civilizations that never knew about Yahweh at all, that had moral codes within their civilization. And to include even, I don't know if this is an argument for or against God, but we can see that that even animals have morality. When you start thinking about like primates, especially primates, the ones that are kind of 98% type DNA as us, you have entire baboons, clans that they serve each other. If a leopard attacks, the elder ones will go to the back to preserve all the people. So they're even altruistic. They will fight almost in a suicidal match to save the younger people of their society. And it's shown. And if you do something like steal, even though you're an ape, the rest of the apes will beat your ass. Like so it's not like they worship God.
Well, so hang on. So Dre, on the animal thing, yes, those behaviors occur. I knew you'd have opinions on that. So, there's a big A word that I've got to throw into that, right? Yeah. Just as I promised I wasn't going to use big words and try to be too verbose. So this word anthropomorphism comes to mind, right? And for those that don't know the word, that simply means ascribing human emotions to non-human entities, right? Feelings, when a person says my dog is mad at me because I went out of town, that's anthropomorphizing, right? Dogs don't get mad because of that. They can have other things and they have emotions, but not in the sense that we're thinking. Like they can be scared, they can be hungry, they can be cold. We're pretty sure that animals don't feel things like jealousy in the sense that we feel it. What they are expressing is, pack frustration and, some kind of a dominance hierarchy stressor that challenges.
You're saying they exhibit behaviors that resemble to us morality, but they have different motivations.
That's what I'm getting at. And so right. Like, the stuff with the apes that you're talking about, Dre, I would suggest that these are very well evolved survival traits that packs that have developed them have learned that makes sense, right? And those that didn't develop them don't survive as well. So those that do these things that make more sense, they survive, they reproduce better, they have better functioning animal societies, right? Right. And I think that's fair. And I think that's even appropriate.
So
I just saw a
add-
video of these ants. It was an ant colony and a termite colony. Okay. And these are two insects that in the wild just attack each other and try to kill each other. And there was a train of ants and a train of termites, and they had what they called in the description warrior termites and warrior ants that had created a wall. And they basically had each other at gunpoint. Like there's these like ants and termites like in a line.
Mexican standoff.
And they're facing each other. And then there's a freeway of ants and termites behind them, like moving food. Like literally these two insects with like barely a brain understood that if they stood each other down, they could get their people by, and then they could go about their business and not have to have a full-on genocidal war. It was a fascinating video to see.
So let me ask this then. So if you take intelligence and you take even a nervous system that induces empathy or sympathy, and we have evolved emotions compared to animals, does it not stand to reason that we would develop these rules and behavior for instinctually for our own existence?
I
can't run around killing people because to that end, we cease to exist.
Yeah.
You can't kill young people because they're the ones that replace us.
They need protection. They need nurturing.
You can't just kill women because they are the means of how we get more, and they're weaker, right? So they have to be protected.
So you're saying that because we see evidence of something that we might call morality evolving in lesser animals, therefore it isn't a valid proof of God's existence that humans have morality.
I'm not saying that. I'm saying that that's it could be.
Trey said, I didn't say no Phil Flannery.
Yeah, right. I didn't say that. I'm asking. I'm like, how does that prove that there is God, right? And that's a different question than saying that there isn't.
And again, I would say that to reiterate, the moral argument on its own doesn't necessarily prove God's existence. But if we, and I do not at all dispute that morality is a social construct, or even that it's a product of evolution. But if it's merely that, if that's all it is, then when we address moral shortcomings or moral violations with this righteous indignation, it rings hollow if it's not more than that.
But I think there's evidence of us not being morally outraged to some things that used to be objectionable. I think so, because morality changes, then it's not objective, is what you're saying? Yes.
Okay.
I mean, you threw out slavery earlier, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't objectively wrong during the antebellum period.
It wasn't objectively wrong for 4,000 years before that.
Right.
Well,
since the dawn of man, we've had slavery.
Sure, but
and we still have it, by the way.
The Israelites treated it differently because they were slaves, right? So they had a different outlook on it, but they still engaged.
I mean, it still exists in the world, right? Okay. Humans still enslave other humans.
Right. So was abolishing slavery an improvement, or is it just a change in our morality?
Depends on who you ask.
Well, no, it's
I mean, sure. Even if it is an improvement, isn't that what evolution is? Isn't that what progress is? And there are ways we can digress, and we're not far away from enslaving things and people and types tomorrow.
To call it progress, you have to have an idea of where we're supposed to be. You have to have an idea of a destination. You have to have a standard in view. Otherwise, if that standard is not greater than man, if it's just a matter of personal preference, then it's not really progress. It's not really improvement. And
I mean, sure, but if that progress is simply the well-being of people, because instinctually that's what we do.
And I think we need to back up a little bit, because I think a lot of times in these discussions, people, hold on, I got a loose cable here. People mistake epistemology for ontology when it comes to the moral
what do those
argument.
words mean?
I'm getting to that. It's often argued, you guys, and you might be doing this, the moral argument is often mistaken to mean if you don't believe in God, then you can't be moral.
No, that's not how I took it.
Sure, but just to clear this up and
finish this train of thought though.
It's all, you know, we need religion and belief in God, otherwise people will run around raping and murdering each other. That's not the argument. That's the idea that we need a belief in God epistemologically. Epistemology is the study of how we know things. Ontology is a matter of what something is, what its properties are that make it what it is. The moral argument is that morality ontologically requires God. It's not you have to believe in God in order to be moral. It's people already are moral. What does that mean? We would agree. I think we would agree that everybody has a conscience, and if they don't have a conscience, there's something wrong with them. They're deficient somehow. You guys talked about morality changing over time as if this is a rebuttal to the argument. Mathematics has changed over time. Mathematical systems are social constructs, whether you use Roman numerals or Arabic numerals or positional notation, decimal points, base 10, base 12, base 6. All of these are matters of social construction. But the laws of mathematics are still written into the universe. You can give a classroom full of 100 people an identical math test, and you're not going to get back identical answers on all those tests. That doesn't mean that mathematics is inherently subjective or subject to change. It just means some people are better or worse at math than other people. But it's still.
Are you saying that behavior doesn't prove morality right, wrong, or exists at all?
Well, the fact that some people fail to exhibit moral behavior, that
because a lot of non-moral behavior is absolutely learned in your environment and in what's acceptable. Different environments here in the United States alone. You have your East Coast, you have your West Coast, you have your Midwest, you have your inner city, and those rules all change depending on where you are. And somebody may find some of those rules abhorrent, but in that world, it's not.
Sure. What does that mean though? What is that?
It means that, I mean, you have to be kind of a mutant to buck against your own society. For example, if you're constantly with miserable people your entire life and you're stuck in a room with them and you find a way to be happy, you're not normal, right? Everybody would be, so now release those miserable people out into the world, and are they all of a sudden just going to become
I understand
moral and happy?
I get that, but what does that say for the moral argument though, or the existence of objective morality? Like, let's say that culture is pro-murder.
Mm-hmm.
Does that mean that murder is?
We have a pro-murder culture in our own current culture, but
yeah.
Sure,
is that morally equivalent to an anti-murder culture, or is that a failure within that culture?
Well, the problem is the word. The problem isn't the broader question you're asking. So
which word?
Murder.
Okay.
So it's almost impossible to have to have a black and white moral conversation about murder, because what is murder? taking a life inappropriately, right? Because the appropriateness matters. That's
Right,
where
and then-
that's where the morality
Okay.
comes.
because
It's
the
not about
word
taking
justice
life.
is more
No
appropriate.
one is actually diametrically opposed to taking life. I don't think there's a single group on planet Earth, except maybe some kind of like extreme fringe vegan non-confrontational.
There are the death, no circumstance, not war,
but not
no death penalty.
animals,
No,
but what is-
yeah.
But hang on, but that's my point though. The point isn't the word murder, because murder's it's too simple of because even biblically speaking, what was murder? Was human sacrifice murder?
Yeah.
Okay, so when God told Abraham to sacrifice his son, was he telling him to commit murder?
Yeah, and then he stopped him. And
but he wasn't though. It was a sacrifice.
Okay.
And
I think you're missing the point of the story.
No, I'm not. I'm 100% not missing the point.
You are 100% missing it. The point of God stopping him was established that, oh yeah, that is wrong. God wasn't going to let him do that because it was murder, because human sacrifice is not acceptable to God. But that's the point.
And there was a human sacrifice thing going around at that point, right?
But hold on, but I think there's a lot of human sacrifice going on, and the Bible condemns that. But Matt, are you saying that because, like, for some people the definition of murder is ambiguous or different?
I'm saying it's ambiguous regardless. That's what
I don't think it's ambiguous.
Is it murder to execute somebody for committing a crime?
No,
there's a lot of people that think it is.
Because some people are bad at math. Does that mean that mathematics is
that's a false equivalence, dude? Come on.
It's not. That's
the
debate.
You're establishing that you're the one that has the right answer to what is and isn't acceptable, and anybody that has a different opinion is bad at math.
I might be bad at math myself, but the fact is you can be corrected with the right math. The question, if morality is purely subjective, then it goes out the window.
First of all, I didn't say it was purely subjective. I said murder. The term is purely subjective.
I don't think murder is purely subjective. I think you have to be deliberately obtuse.
You find 100 people and you're not going to get anywhere close to 100 similar answers on what murder is.
I think you can get it. Well, yeah, but yet we still have a law that,
right.
And
that's why it's never black and white when people get tried for it. Trayvon Martin's situation wasn't black and white. Was that murder? What about the cop in Minnesota? Was that murder?
That's
the court system said it was, and I disagree. As an example, by the way, hot take. Like if that bothers you as a listener, that's a hot take from me, right? That was Matt that said it.
Well, but we have standards of evidence that you have to be met for,
and yet they met them. So do you think Chauvin committed murder?
No, I don't. But that's not ambiguity in the term murder. That's deficiencies in the court system. The law itself is pretty clear on what murder is. If you have an impartial jury and an impartial judge, and you don't try the guy in the court of public opinion,
or you have a lawyer that's better than another one,
right? Yeah, you
can bring evidence and then even display the evidence in such a way that it's.
But you get Harvey Specter to defend your case.
Yeah, but you guys are confusing the issues here. The issue there is not any ambiguity about the definition of murder. The issue there is the ambiguities in the evidence for a specific case.
No, that's actually not what I'm getting at. I'm getting
that's what all the examples you brought up are.
No, because the difference is, was it intentional? Was it appropriate?
Yeah,
right?
If it was intentional, if Derek Chauvin set out to kill George Floyd, that would be murder.
Right.
If Derek Chauvin happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time when George Floyd decided to swallow a bunch of fentanyl pills, that's not murder. And that's pretty cut and dry. We know that.
I agree with you. And yet the courts didn't.
Even somebody who thinks Derek Chauvin killed him, if we frame it that way, they're going to agree on what murder is on those contexts. They dispute the facts that I laid out, they think Derek Chauvin was a racist and deliberately put his knee on George Floyd's neck to kill him. But that's a disagreement about the facts of that particular case. That has nothing to do with the ambiguity of the word murder.
No, I
think this is a straw man.
I don't agree with what you're saying there, because if the criminal activity of the deceased was such that it warranted the officer holding him down and keeping his knee on his neck, and he had died, he would not have been convicted. He wouldn't even been tried of murder, let alone convicted. So the actual case was about whether or not what the guy that died did warranted lethal force by the law officer. By the
guy in one of our threads all the time is like, they always says, well, Ian him doing that was that a death sentence? Was
right. It goes back to my comment earlier about
libertarianism
and whatnot. It's really not about it. When you're talking about a court case and murder, it's about, like let's use the Trayvon Martin situation, because that was self-defense. And that's what made it not murder. No. I
think you were picking the most controversial issues.
Or maybe I picked the ones that make my case the best because they're on two opposite ends of the spectrum. I mean, pick a different one.
But none of these cases, Charles Manson murders.
Okay. Sure.
Is there any ambiguity about that, whether that was murder?
No.
Okay. Why not?
No.
I mean, who you're claiming that the definition of murder is totally up in the air.
I said it can be ambiguous.
Well, surely
I didn't say it always is.
If that's the case, you could find somebody who would disagree that that's murder.
I'm sure there is people that disagree that's murder. Yeah.
There's lots of books on it.
Yeah.
And that's why some of
what's the argument? What's the argument for why that's not murder?
I don't know.
I didn't read the books.
Yeah. I'm just saying there are people that disagree. And that's the point. That it's the context around it.
Well, I think the debate is whether Charles Manson is responsible for the murders, because
that's a different issue.
That is because he didn't commit them, right?
Right, but nobody would deny that murders happened. That what was done in Sharon Tate's house was
again, I can't speak for everybody. I can tell you that I don't have a problem with those being called murder.
I'm gonna put it this way: if there is a person on earth who thinks that the Manson family murders were not murders, they're just morons. They're those people who don't know how to do math. Their inability to do math does not invalidate math or make it subjective. Morality is objective in the same way. We might have to evolve and develop, and we might have to be taught it, but that doesn't mean that it's just totally up for grabs whether murder is wrong or whether raping and stealing and all the other stuff that we all know is wrong. And the claim of
So okay, I'll play, and I'm trying to work this through on purpose, by the way. So you just made a simple statement: stealing is wrong. Do you believe that to be morally, objectively true?
Sure.
Okay. So if you're a Marine in a combat zone and your truck breaks down and you're behind enemy lines and your team is going to be overrun and killed by opposing forces within the next hour, is it wrong to steal a part off of a civilian vehicle to get your truck running so you and your team can get out of harm's way?
There are higher values that are being served.
That's
by
not the way objectivity works, Brian. And
well,
you know that better than I do.
It is.
That's not the way objectivity works. Things are very binary when you use the word objective.
I think you don't know what objectivity means.
Really?
And let me explain what let me explain here.
Okay.
Like every moral claim is not absolute in its own right. If I have to steal to save an innocent life and it's a small thing, I'm sacrificing a lesser value for a higher value. The person who's mad that I stole their car to go save an innocent life when I explain it to them, yeah, sorry about your car. I had to go save a baby from a burning building. They're probably going to understand. If I'm just stealing for this because I want the guy's car, well, that's clearly wrong. Like you're, as I said last week, morality. There's no question over whether morality is relative. It's a question of whether it's relative to what is it relative is the question. Is it relative to personal preference?
There's no question that it's relative.
Yes.
But the question is, what's it relative to?
So,
For example,
so there's no such thing as
if-
objective morality then.
No,
that's
not what that means.
If I have to murder someone to keep them from murdering me or keep them from murdering my wife,
That's not,
then
you're
then
not
it's not
murdering
mur-
them.
But that's not murder, and that's the reason I said murder is subjective in of itself.
Well, no, it's not. That's not subjective.
so
Self-defense
killing-
is not murder.
So is killing moral? Sometimes, if right,
Well, and that's
justifiably so.
and that's why we
So-
choose a word like murder instead of killing.
Can you justify anything?
What does that mean, Dre?
Anything can
My-
be justifiable if you try hard
Can
enough. is his
anything be
point.
justified? What do you mean? What does that mean?
I
It's
don't.
pretty
I don't.
straightforward.
I don't know what. Well, can I justify like torturing a child for fun? No, I couldn't. I couldn't do that.
Okay, that's pretty extreme. How about just killing a child? Is that justified?
It depends on the situation.
So
and-
yes, it can be justified.
Sure, but killing is not the same word. Is not the same thing as murder, and you guys know this. Like I don't understand this line of questioning.
Is murder the only thing that can be justified?
I didn't say that.
No, I'm
I mean,
asking. What
it's-
else can't be justified?
What else can't be justified? I mean, murdering for fun. I mean, we dropped a couple of bombs on Japan that killed a lot of people.
So the reason matters.
Yeah, the reason matters. Yeah.
Right. So anything can be justified, including murder.
Anything is a pretty wide open statement. I mean, it depends on the circumstances, but the bottom line, like
So murder only means for no reason. That's the definition of murder, or is it somebody? The movie Saw, right? Like,
by the way,
if you don't murder this dude, this guy dies, and that's your.
By the way, I wouldn't characterize the Hiroshima bombings as murder, but I will grant that somebody could argue that. It could be argued that if they were murdered, Japan murdered them by attacking us and putting us in a position where we had to go to war with them.
That's absurd.
Why is
way
that
absurd?
That's absurdly circular logic.
Okay,
Right.
explain why that's absurd.
Because the atom bomb didn't exist when they attacked us, for one. So there was no threat.
And
So
two,
so you're going to
they could have had the
retroactively
same
apply a
outcome
threat that they should have known
without
better,
dropping that bomb.
didn't humanly exist before.
One at a time, Matt. Repeat
Because
that.
the bomb didn't exist. The concept of atomic warfare was not part of human capability before.
What the hell does that have to do with anything?
Well, if you're going
Warfare.
to do something to somebody, you have to actually know that the threat exists for it to be a deterrent or for it to
Okay.
be held against them as a repercussion.
If I break into your house to murder your family and I don't know that you're armed, and then you shoot me, have you murdered me?
No, that's not even close to what you just said.
That's
You break into
that's
my
exactly
house.
what I just said.
So I go and kill your grandparents. And then I blame you
No.
because how dare
Because
you
you should
make
have
me
attacked
kill
me,
your
motherfucker.
grandparents? That's literally
that's
what you just said.
That's not literally what I just said.
Yeah, it
obviously.
is. We killed a bunch of Japanese grandparents because their kids attacked us.
Because Japan as a nation attacked us as a nation, which means that we're at war with them as a nation. The fact that we didn't have nukes when they did it doesn't change the fact that they provoked us into a war with them. And so going to war with them, we have to kill a lot of them to stop them from trying to kill us.
We killed so many of them so that they would capitulate.
Right. We killed so many civilians that they would
They're like,
capitulate.
holy shit.
that's-
Civilians who were
That to happen again. So you're saying
around-
there was no other avenue we could have taken to win that war?
Well, that's debatable.
There wasn't debatable. There
But-
was lots of alternatives. We chose to kill that many people for the shock and awe value and to scare Russia. I mean, there's lots of
Yeah, so they would stop fighting and surrender, so we didn't have to keep fighting island to island, hand to hand. And by the way, the number of people we killed with the nukes didn't compare to the number they killed at Nanking in China, or would have killed if we didn't go to war with them.
So,
but the fact
they're worse than us, therefore
So-
it's totally okay.
so
It's still their fault.
okay,
Yeah,
so
it's their fault. What was she wearing?
okay, so we were wrong to drop those bombs.
That's not what anybody said.
No,
You
nobody
made a
said that.
ridiculous statement that it's the Japanese fault that we nuked
Right.
Japan. That's what
It's-
the two of us are addressing, not
It's
whether
the
or not
it's the Japanese fault that we were at war with them.
Sure.
Okay. So why is what I said absurd?
That we nuked 2 civilian cities.
Okay. So,
That's Japan's fault.
okay.
No.
So were we
Your
wrong to do it?
choices, you never get to blame an external party for your choice, Brian. Like I'm struggling to believe that you're trying to genuinely, with a straight face, make this argument. I know you have a reason behind it, and I don't believe that you believe it, but you backed yourself into a corner, and I don't understand why you did it. It's a weird argument.
It's a weird argument that we were justified in nuking
No.
Japan.
It's a weird argument to say it was their fault
Yeah, it was. Yeah, they provoked us into a war.
to
We didn't
destroy
ask-
2 of their largest
We
civilian
didn't
centers.
ask. We didn't ask for a war. So are you saying we were wrong to drop those nukes?
Nope.
Okay, so what's your point?
I am.
I'm saying we made a
I am.
decision. We made a risk-based.
We did make a decision.
and I can live with that.
Okay,
And living with it is not the same thing as saying that it's wrong.
It's not the same thing as saying it's their fault either.
You're not even remotely close to that.
well,
But I mean, I've done things that are wrong, but I'm like, no, I can live with it. I can live with the wrong thing that I did.
so was it objectively wrong, or was it just
What the fuck?
people?
I don't
people
believe in
didn't-
objectively wrong. I don't believe in objective truths. You know that. I push back against that on a regular basis because it's a cheap, lazy philosophical way of trying to say it's unarguable. It's beyond contestation. And that's not, it just doesn't exist in the world.
I don't think we're in the moral argument anymore. I think we're in we're into
That's okay.
postmodernism.
I mean, maybe.
And is math objective?
Mhm.
Math is objective.
Math and science are pretty darn objective.
So
Like
why-
physics is kind of hard to argue with. Ask the inhabitants of Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
So how is that different than truth being subjective? There's
Truth.
you just said there's no objective truth.
I didn't say objective truth. If I did, I didn't mean that. But I said, I don't even know what I don't remember the question you asked. Was it objectively wrong? That's what you asked me.
Yeah.
Or objectively right or objectively wrong. And that's, you're asking a question
Our
that
choice
doesn't
is
have
objectively right
an
or wrong.
objective. There's not an objective answer. Everything doesn't have an objective answer. Is that blue? Is that pretty? Is that fast? Those aren't
Blue is-
objective questions.
Blue is objective.
No, it's not, because you know how many things are actually pure blue? Light comes on a spectrum, and you happen
Yeah.
to see part of that spectrum being refracted back at you. Whether or not that thing's actually blue or not, it could be chartreuse, it could be some kind of blue green, it could be purplish. You're seeing blue. That doesn't mean it's objectively blue.
It's objectively reflecting blue light into your eye.
It's
That's why you're
giving blue. That
That's
doesn't
why
mean it's
you're-
objectively blue.
I think that's a semantic distinction that doesn't mean
I-
anything.
You picked a bad example to ask me a question because you picked me an answer on a spectrum.
I don't think you know what objective means, Matt.
I don't think you do, because I just Googled it while we were sitting here, and I can read the definitions, and it's pretty clear what objective means.
Well, you can think that, and
I feel like
think that-
smiling. Read the definition.
The objective, there's three definitions. Let me go to Merriam, because people don't tend to argue with Merriam. Which one's the one that makes
Miriam's
sense?
objective. That's why.
Let's see, the one that makes sense for this: expressing or dealing with facts or conditions as perceived without distortion by personal feelings, prejudices, or interpretations, right?
Okay.
So you can have objective outcomes, but you can't have objective reasons behind it, is the point of that.
Well, it's not, is it of God or is it a social construct? It can be both. I think it's, is it of God or is it merely a social construct?
Okay.
Because like,
I like
it
that.
is a social construct for sure.
Yeah.
But so is math.
Math is a social construct?
No, arithmetic.
Mathematical systems are a social construct.
Arithmetic's not. It's objective.
Okay. I don't know enough about math. I thought math was a thing. I thought it just
Or they say in
existed.
England, the
Well,
maths.
Do you use Roman numerals or
That doesn't matter.
Arabic
That's
numerals?
language. That's the language
Right.
of math. I don't
Well,
think the
but my
language of math
point
is
is-
relevant.
My point is that the systems we use to express it are social constructs, whether we use base 10 or base 12.
Right.
Or base,
But none of that changes Pythagoras's theorem. A
agree.
squared plus B squared is always going to be C squared, right? Or
I
times.
agree, but like people often
I think that's
object
Brian's
that-
point. Yeah.
People
They
often
do.
object that, well, you have to be morality can't be from God because your parents teach you that it's a social, because it's a social construct is the point. Like if you didn't have society teaching you that, you wouldn't have that morality. But the same thing is true of your multiplication tables. You still had to have someone teach you that. You didn't come up with Pythagorean by the one guy in all of history came up with Pythagorean theorem, and it took that kind of a guy to do it, and it took a Leibniz and a Newton to invent calculus. These are all social constructs, but they correspond with the objective immutable laws of the universe too.
Yeah,
So-
I guess I'm just struggling with calling them a social construct because I kind of don't get that phrasing. And I'm not trying to pick it. I'm not trying to start another fight. I just don't see how that, like, it doesn't matter what you call it. It still exists, right? Like,
right. But that's the point about morality.
Right.
is-
I think that's Brian's whole point.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter what you call it or how you get there, what your fucking perspective is. It's still there.
No, I agree.
Yeah.
And I don't see the two as the same as my point, because
Well, okay.
going back to, I don't want to rehash this whole thing. Going back to,
Are you still recording?
yeah,
Yeah, this might be good content actually.
going back to the murder thing. You can't, murder's the bad choice. I hate that one. Actually, I don't know which one's right. Child safety. So let's child safety is probably the hardest one to argue against.
Did you say
Right.
child slavery?
Child safety. So I'm talking about like child sex abuse, child
Oh,
abuse, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It's a lot harder to argue that it's possibly
Child
be okay.
endangerment.
Child
Yeah.
endangerment, yeah. So if you say, child molestation is not okay in no circumstance.
Unless you're the prophet of Islam. And it's encouraged.
So, but again, I think even in that situation, they would argue, one, it was appropriate for whatever reason, right? They're gonna use a but kind of thing.
We should explore that. That's a fun argument.
The conversation just kind of skeeves me out to even talk about it, but
You brought up the example,
it's
man.
no, I know, because I'm trying to pick something
Yeah.
that's more ironclad, has less subjectivity to it, right? One is very hard pressed to find a situation where that could be considered okay. So given that, it doesn't really matter if you're told it's okay or not, because it's never going to be okay. And even a person who's told it's okay, it's never going to sit okay with them internally, right? Actually, shit. So the movie I just watched.
So it's objectively wrong, is what you're saying.
I think so. Yeah, I would. That one I wouldn't argue with you on. Right. I don't think there's ever a situation where you can say, well, given this, it's now okay. Right. Kingdom of Heaven. So you guys probably haven't seen it nearly as recently as me. That whole ending sequence could have been averted in the movie, not in real life because it didn't happen that way. But the main character, the king says to him, "Hey, will you marry my sister?" And he's like, "Well, what about her husband?" He's like, "I'm going to kill that motherfucker. Like, don't worry about it. We're going to execute him."
I'm going to kill him only if you marry him.
Right. And he goes, "Don't put that evil on me, Ricky Bobby." Right. Like he was like, "No, I won't do it." And they were like, "Do you know what you're saying? You realize what's going to happen?" He goes, "I don't care. You have my answer. You have my love, but you have my answer." So like to that dude, there was no way you could justify, even like Jerusalem might have fell. Everybody in Jerusalem could have been murdered by the Saracens,
even though he already slept with her anyway. So
which was a really weird take, by the way, right?
And that guy already deserved to die anyway,
right?
And it was the king, whose whole job it was to kill people like that.
Like all of it was just like.
Yeah,
but
then he shouldn't have presented it that way. He should have just killed him and said, "Hey, she's free. You should."
Now that he's dead, right? Like she's free.
I like Ridley Scott's point that he was going for. Like it's the kingdom of heaven is a kingdom of conscience or nothing at all.
Right. No, I liked
it. That was such a terrible illustration. Like I pull my hair. I actually was like right after we watched Napoleon and we were eating dinner, I brought up that scene, and we were kind of.
Well,
weighing Ridley Scott movies,
and clearly he had it in his mind because he had carved it on the piece of wood over his house where he first came from, right? And then at the end,
was what man is a man who does not improve his?
It was loosely tied. It was the same thing. The point was he was a good dude,
sure,
and he had made a point to be a good human being. Then his dad told him on his deathbed, "Be a good dude." And so he already wanted to be a good dude. His dad told him he had to be a good dude. When he was presented with something that he thought was terrible, even though the ends justified the means, he was like, "I can't do it." And
that was
all these people fucking died because of it.
Yeah, I would especially if I'd already slept with her, I would have been like, "Yeah, kill him. I'll take her. Good deal. Let's save lots of people." And I also get what I want, but no, I get what I want. So it's wrong. And all these people have to die for my dumb conscience.
Right. But again, this was an example of somebody who was trying to say that this one moral belief was, beyond contestation, and I can't bend to it, even though all of these other things around it said it was okay to bend this a little bit, right? Like, to me, that's right dead in center of what we're talking about, what we talked about for the last couple of hours.
And to that, I would say that some people are really bad at math. That doesn't change the laws of mathematics. Like
his calculation was pretty terrible in my
somebody
mind.
Can be morally retarded, but he's still wrong. Like, and I would say hit like Balian of Ibelin was, I would say he was the worst person in that movie because he was so self-righteous that he's
pretty self-righteous.
He decided like he'd already committed adultery with her to begin with, and
maybe he repented and couldn't do it again.
Yeah, well, then he should have shown that, and
maybe,
but it still would have. It wouldn't have changed it because like he's deciding. Yeah, I don't want to say he's the worst guy. I'd say King Baldwin is the worst guy because like it's your job to kill that guy. Like you're supposed to be keeping the peace.
I'm pretty sure Guy and the redheaded dude were the worst guys there.
Well, I mean, they were animals, and I'm sure, yeah, they were definitely bad people, but people who were in a position, I don't care to weigh who was worse or now.
It's a good movie though.
This is not because there's not a right answer to who is the worst, but the whole point, another major facet of Christianity is that yes, there is objective, ironclad, immutable good and evil, and we are bound to obey the good, but we are not fit to judge. what is, what's more evil, who is deserving of what in terms of ultimate punishment. We can say that was evil for them to break treaties and raid Muslim villages. We can say it was evil for him to commit adultery and then not save thousands of people because of his misguided conscience. But we can't decide. And this is all like fiction written by Ridley Scott anyway.
Right. It was historical fiction. I love the scene when they're sitting there having that war council, and he's like, listen, we can't keep doing this. We're not ready to go to war with Salah ad-Din. And then the one guy's like, if we fight under the banner of Christ, we can't be beaten. He's like, he'll kick the shit out of us. And they're all blasphemy, blasphemy. That shit cracked me up. I haven't seen the movie in years. So watching it last night with my son, I was like really dialed into a lot of parts of it. I was like, what the hell?
I love that movie.
Yeah, it's a great flick.
But I want to pull the hair out of my head when I see stuff in there. Like it's interesting that Balian of Ibelin has this distinctly 20th century Western view of religion.
When everybody else was so.
Yeah. It's like, and it's, and Ridley Scott, of course, is an atheist. If you've seen Exodus, he depicts God as a fickle, spoiled child. Which kind of tells you everything you need to know about Ridley Scott's views on religion. But he makes good movies, and I get goosebumps whenever Orlando Bloom gets knighted, and then when he knights the people at the end.
All the people, that bishop, he was such a punk. He's walking out, he goes, hey, just convert, repent later.
Yeah, he was clearly there for Ridley Scott to like beat up on medieval Christians. If we're talking about the moral argument and whether morality is objective or whether it's just a subjective matter of preference, and those are really the only two options, and we can't agree on what objective means, I don't know where to go from there. But I mean, but the claim of Christianity is that God has set a day when he will judge the world with justice by the man he has appointed. He has given proof of this to all men by raising him from the dead. And the whole point of Christianity is that God is the judge, and that's the definition of God.
Mm-hmm.
And it's built in, and it's ontologically built into the concept of morality.
Mm-hmm. I think part of the problem of this conversation, or this line of thinking, is I think it's almost impossible for a Christian to separate the idea of the fact that God does in fact have a set of moral laws or moral opinions, constraints, whatever the right verbiage is, right? So what I'm trying to say is the three of us have no disagreement that God is the final arbiter of what's morally correct, simply put, right? Like that's the three of us nod our head on that and go, absolutely.
It's objective because he says so.
Right. Correct. And there's no
not our interpretation of what he says necessarily.
Right.
But there is objective truth in God's eyes.
So I don't think it's I think it's nearly impossible. I would suggest impossible for a Christian to be able to think about or speak about morals without their religious bias affecting the conversation, right? I think that's a part of being a human. And I think the conversation around morality is such a weird conversation anyway. And for all the reasons that we just sat and pissed all over each other for the last hour, it's a really weird conversation to have. I don't know how to have it without having the concept of God over the top of it. And I think that's the point of the moral argument, is that, well, somebody's going, well, no shit, Matt, that's the whole point, because morals come from God. But I think that's only true to a person who's coming at it from the Christian perspective, is what I'm trying to say. because I think a person that was born an affirmed atheist would have a very different view of what the laws of morality are or aren't, without having that bias. And by the way, I'm admitting to having that bias, and I'm not ashamed of it, because it's part of who I am in my core, right?
It sounds like you're saying that a Christian is at a disadvantage in talking about morality because of our Christianity.
I don't know about a disadvantage. I mean, it's part of what colors the way we think.
Well, you use the word, well, but the alternative is, Nietzsche recognized that the supposed death of God from the Enlightenment renders life meaningless. Because you need, he was an atheist. He's probably the atheist. He recognized that if God doesn't exist, if life is just an accident, we're just bugs on a rock in a void. Nobody intended for us to be here. There's no plan or purpose to it, which means there's nothing wrong with if a serial killer decides that the most meaningful thing he can do with his life is to stalk and murder co-eds, and there's nothing to say that's less valid than anything we do. Right. If there's no God, if we're all just here accidentally. So that's one atheist who acknowledges that you need God for objective morality. And his answer to this was, well, you need the Ubermensch to arise to supply a new set of values. And the Ubermensch would be the next step in human evolution. He would be as superior to man as superior to the apes. But he recognized that you need that higher authority greater than man to supply value to man. And whatever value there is, you do need humans to apply it. But the fact of the matter is, that's a perfect summation of the issue.
So is society greater than man? I think some would say so.
Sure, but
so does there need to be a God to be something to be held accountable toward? Yes. Is the collective consciousness of everyone more important than somebody than a single person, so that they'll be held accountable for not following the law of your society,
like the Nazis?
Sure.
I would say that no. I mean, if
the communists or America.
If I'm a German in the 1930s and my whole country is turning Nazi and trying to conquer the world and wipe out the Jews, it doesn't matter how many people disagree with me. If I object to that, if I say that no, that global conquest and wiping out an entire race of people is wrong, I am right and everybody else is wrong. The fact that the very fact that we recognize that societies can be wrong and often are, and that we're holding them to a standard that's above all societies, indicates that no, society is not an adequate source of ultimate morality. And the fact that we consider the abolition of slavery and later the abolition of Jim Crow laws, we consider these to be real improvements, objective improvements, that indicates that we all know there is a standard that we're obligated to which we're obligated that's higher than our society. Now, the atheists will object that morality is our conscience is the product of having been born into a home with parents who acted as that authority, and we learn to sort of submit to that, and we feel ourselves, that's where we get our sense of obligation to behave a certain way. And they're not wrong in observing that, but those same people will also recognize that if your parents are Nazis, then you're not obligated. I mean, they still can't get past this idea that we have a moral obligation beyond just our parents or our community or our society. Otherwise, they don't have a leg to stand on when they condemn slavery and Nazis. And that standard, by definition, is God. Get rid of God, then all of their their strident moralizing, it lacks conviction, and it becomes a farce.
Or it just ever evolves, even ebbs and flows.
Right. It just
not
moves with whatever the Overton window of the day
right.
says.
That could be good, could be bad.
Right.
It could be, we could be going down, or we could be going up.
Well, that's what
slavery, right? I mean,
so
I don't know that we appealed to a higher authority. I think we appealed to ourselves to abolish slavery. Enough people believed that it was wrong, and enough people stopped it.
Sure, but
they happened to be Christians, but it wasn't like they were quoting scripture while they were doing it, right?
Well, they actually were quoting scripture while they were doing it, but I think that's beside the point. I mean, are you saying that wasn't an objective improvement? It was just that our preferences change, and that's all there was to it?
That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that and I think you made this super clear early, that if we only use the moral argument for God, then it doesn't really stand on itself. But yeah, we deemed it objective. We did. So that construct made it objective.
Yeah. Or another example of that where society just made a change like that would be the French Revolution. Having two of us just watch Napoleon, right? Like, I'm being a little hyperbolic, but the French literally went to bed one night having a queen, and they woke up and they were like, nah, we want this thing called democracy. And they just started killing people, right?
Well, again, the fact that people change their collective moral outlook, that doesn't mean that it's not an improvement.
But it doesn't mean it is.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm a fan of democracy, right? So obviously I tend to agree that they happened to make the right decision, but then they basically went right back around and ended up with an emperor again, right? They kind of just went, right. It was like a make-believe loop they did because they didn't really know what democracy was.
Same with the czars.
The US did it, right? We tried to make George Washington our king after we got our independence because we didn't know better. We didn't know how to do the other thing. But my point was just, society making a moral change doesn't mean it's good, and I don't know that it necessarily means that it's divine either, right? That's the point,
right? Is it divine?
But that's not my argument. The argument is not that if a society changes, that's automatically good. My point is that we all recognize that those particular changes I pointed out we all regard them as objective improvements, because they brought society closer in line to what we all recognize is that standard of good that is the nature and will of God, to which we're accountable. Now, if that's not true, then it renders all of our moralizing, all of our basic the basic premise of all of our human interactions, it renders it absurd. It renders it meaningless. And just on the strength of the moral argument alone, maybe that's true, but nobody can actually live that way. We can't. Society breaks down. And as it pertains to and again, the basic premise of Christianity is that everybody has a conscience. Everybody recognizes that they have that obligation to morality, to moral behavior, and everybody, if they're being honest, should recognize that they fall short of it. they are in the wrong relationship to God, and they need a way back. But if that's not true, if that's not something we all believe, then Christianity itself collapses.
I think a
That
big argument.
It feels like reverse nihilism. To throw that, if this is true, if that's not true, then Christianity just falls apart. Like that feels like
nihilism. It's just nihilism.
Well, but it's nihilism in the sake believing that God exists still, though, right? Like nihilism, the whole point of nihilism was God's dead, right? So nothing matters.
That's what I'm saying. If that's not true, if that claim about and I'm saying that to appeal to you guys or anybody listening who thinks of themselves as Christian or is open to Christianity. If without that foundation, Christianity falls apart. And it's not reverse nihilism. It's just, if that's not true, that's what that means. God doesn't exist. It's basically what Nietzsche was afraid of and was trying to deal with.
So a big, Christians, if you were to type in morality and Christianity on the internet, a lot of returns would come back. Basically, we do this out of fear because we want to go to the promised land
and not go to hell,
burn in hell. Yeah,
right.
So a lot of atheists will attack that point where you're just living in fear, because
it's kind of like Pascal's gambit, and that isn't that what that was?
Yeah, sure.
Pascal's wager. Yeah, I hate
wager. Yeah. And I just threw that out there. I shouldn't do that as a throwaway. So for anybody that doesn't know what that means, and Brian will correct me when I don't say this accurately, but it was Blaise Pascal, right? Yeah. And basically his argument for Christianity was, if Christianity is right and you believe in it, you're good. If Christianity is wrong, but you believe in it, you lived a good life and then you go into nothingness, so you're still good. If Christianity is right and you don't believe in it, you're big time screwed. So given those options, why not just believe in Christianity and hedge your bets? Like that's essentially what Pascal came up with, right?
Yeah, you covered it.
Yeah, he was like, the worst case scenario is you're a pretty decent human being and then you turn into nothing.
I hear a lot of Christians cite that as and use that as an argument for Christianity.
Right.
I think God is insulted by that.
I would hope so.
Right. That's why I don't just baptize it all willy-nilly, right? Like, well, I mean,
yeah. Paul said
South
that
Park, Mormons. The answer was Mormon. Damn it. Welcome to hell's orientation.
I always feel like when people do that, God's like, "What am I, a joke to you?" he's that
funny like a clown.
and Paul wrote that if Christ has not been raised, our faith is useless, and you are still in your sins.
Right.
If the dead are not raised, then we are to be pitied above all men. He would have been horrified that Christians were going around citing Pascal's wager as an argument for Christianity. But the fact that we can become Christian safely without any cost that's probably going to change down pretty soon here. But the fact that you can be Christian without any significant social cost is, I guess, sort of testament to our success. But
I guess I'm just saying that I can't stand that argument. I can't stand when people are like, well, because I don't want to go to hell. Like,
right.
Fucking what?
Like, yeah. And that is
that's like saying I don't murder people just because I don't want to go to jail.
Yeah. And
I mean, it's an incentive. Don't get me wrong. Like,
I've seen Oz.
Right. Yeah,
that's literally why I don't murder people.
And but you
no,
bring
Matt,
up
you'd be killing them. They'd be justified. Right. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I read Matt wrong.
But this does bring up an interesting, like, people will often raise.
I don't cheat on my wife because I don't want to be divorced, because giving her half my shit is not an option.
Right. Like that's even a non-biblical way of like,
right,
of making that point. Right. Yeah. I don't, yeah.
I don't want to tell my boss to fuck off because I don't want to be fired. Right. So, I mean, how about because it's just not the right thing? Let's just do the right thing for the right reasons at the right time, objectively.
But You raise an interesting point that people that speaks to a common objection that atheists use of well,
And that's why I brought it up. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Okay.
I wanted you to speak on this, is why I brought it up. So I'm sorry for interrupting you.
Okay. What if I just live a good life and I don't believe in any of that? Is that, am I still good? Because there's a widespread illusion that we're good people because we've never murdered anybody and we've never stolen, we've never broken laws. But going back to what you guys pointed out, what Matt pointed out about libertarianism, we typically don't consider it because we're aware that those people with the badges and the guns will come after us if we do it. So we're kind of constantly aware that it's not, even if we're tempted to kill somebody, or steal from them or do whatever else might get us arrested, we know it's not really, the system is set up so that the carrots are all in complying, and there's a stick at our back if we don't. And so we just don't really entertain it. So we're not as tempted as perhaps we would be if we didn't live in a world with laws and doors with locks on them and all the other things that are set up to keep us on the straight and narrow. So we have a widespread illusion of being good. But it's really just that. It's which speaks to the atheist view of it kind of, it's kind of, jujitsu on the atheist argument that, well, you guys are just not sinning because you don't want to go to hell. Well, you're kind of doing the same thing if you're honest with yourself, because you don't want to go to jail. It doesn't mean you're good. It just means you understand that it's not in your best interest to do that. But to the idea of doing this so you don't go to hell, we've talked before about the difference between the old covenant and the new covenant. The new covenant is salvation by grace through faith, not by the works of the law. Law, of course, being those sticks and carrots that that incentivize your behavior, whereas faith is you do this because you believe in it. Hell is hell because you're shut out from God's presence. Obeying him is his own reward. You do that. It's the difference between prostitution and marriage. They might resemble each other outwardly, but they're opposites.
Yeah, I mean, and again, it goes back to faith without works is dead and all those other things, right? That the expectation is that you're a different person when you're a Christian, and so you desire to do the right thing, not you're doing it to avoid the stick, right?
Right.
Yeah, I mean,
which is the societal argument. We only do this instinctually because it's how we survive. And I personally, even though I'm the one that brought that argument up, I don't agree. I am on the God side of morality, just for conversation's sake.
Right. I mean, I think we were being argumentative on purpose earlier, but I think some of that is also about maturity. Whether that maturity is, age, wisdom, maturity in your belief, maturity in your desire to be a good human being, maturity in wanting to be a good spouse, right? Like, I think all of those things play into doing the right thing for the right reasons also.
I think maturity plays into recognizing what is good and what isn't, right? What does it mean to live a good life? I think if you asked Andre at age 17, he might have a different answer than I do today.
I know Matt at 17 had a different answer, right?
So those, what does it mean to be a good husband back then, and what it means today, through this roller coaster of a life, you do mature. Unfortunately, plenty of people get extra bitter and they regress anyway. they go through their ebbs and flows and never really make it back to right.
I think that has a lot to do with it. And I think spirituality, you know, is just as a big part of that. I think, I would hazard to guess that even when more mature people come to Christianity later in life, they probably see it a little bit differently than somebody who's been, walking it for a while and being intentional, which is very different than somebody who's just been going to church and going through the motions. I think I probably, for the first half of my Christian life, was just going through the motions. And it's probably only been the last maybe 8-10 years that I've been like intentional about what I'm trying to do and who I'm trying to be.
I think that's why converts are usually better, right? They've been on that other side, and they've really seen the difference. And there is a difference between, growing up a way, and even though it's right and righteous, the perspective is still skewed.
Yep.
Just like, growing up poor and then all of a sudden having a bunch of money,
versus growing up in it. And yeah,
right.
Absolutely. I think all those are valid points.
You have a different appreciation for it. I'm sure Brian, didn't become a Christian until later. And then everyone sees what's in front of you now, right?
Yeah, so. I was 20 years old when I became a Christian, but G.K. Chesterton wrote a book called The Everlasting Man, where he kind of talks about this, how like people have this sort of familiarity with Christianity that breeds a level of contempt and disinterest. But
I believe it.
When he described it as like living on a hill and not seeing the the geography where you live, because you're
the beauty of the view that you have and everything.
But then you travel a few miles away and you look back, and as it turns out, you've been living on the head of this fallen giant for your entire life and not realizing it. And it dominates the landscape, and it's has more to do with your way of life and the benefit of living there than you realized. And that's what Christianity is. And
I can give an example that's not Christianity based. So the three of us were all roughly the same age, essentially children, when we were first given our top secret security clearances by the US government, right? Yeah. And there's a lot of rigor that goes around with that. And for us to grow up, I'm using air quotes, in the cleared space, it's just something. It's not cool, it's not sexy, it's not special, it just is part of your life, right? But then you get exposed to a certain prior infantry staff NCO that became an intelligence analyst, and and these older, new to the cleared world are like, oh my God, like we got this serious responsibility, and I got to drive 8 different ways to work to make sure I'm not being followed. And we're like, what? No, stop it. Like, stop being a weirdo. Right. But I think that's a great example of it, right? Because, he saw it as this massive responsibility, and we saw it as like how you go to work every day.
He saw a lot of movies before he.
Well, but I think it's an apt analogy too, right? Like I'm trying to equivocate, the United States secrets to, the kingdom of God, and you having access to this special thing that not everybody gets to see and be a part of.
And also when you develop habits from a young age, by the time you mature, those habits are just part of you, right? And it can go wrong if you develop bad habits. But if you're brand new and you're trying to create habits, it's tough, and you have to be vigilant. Like if I was a guy who never worked out ever in my life, and all of a sudden I started going to the gym, that's a habit that I like. Those people, all the new people, they're the ones with the apps, they're the ones with the schedules, they're the ones, you got gym bros like, hey,
I'm just going to do some things and some stuff, and a couple of high RPE this, and yeah.
And I think the gym atmosphere, or Christianity, when it has both, I think it's thriving. I think when the skiff has old hats that have been doing it forever, and then you get a moron that comes in and overemphasizes stuff, it kind of reminds us, and then how we can, we take that guy under our arm, but also, hey, maybe I was kind of gaffing that stuff off because it was so normal to me. So I think if you have new converts who are super, all about it, and then you have people like, well, I'm Christian. Oh, right. And you can kind of feel that energy. And when it's, when it's linked up, it could be a really good thing.
Well, I don't know if you, Jerry, I'm sure you remember this. Brian, I don't know if you ever experienced it, but the Marine Corps went through this period where it was bringing back retreads. And basically Marines would get out of active duty and then go become a civilian, hate it, and then basically beg to come back in, right? And what the Marine Corps found is that when they brought those guys back in, they made amazing recruiters. They made really good career planners because they were so born again in the Marine Corps and they'd seen the other side that they were really good at pitching the good and telling the story, right? So they became like very useful, a very specific tool to the Marine Corps. And that perspective is hard to get sometimes. And I think, again, we're off on a different tangent now, but I think that's a big issue for people that grow up in it.
So, I have nightmares about that sometimes.
About being back in the Marine Corps.
Yeah. I'm not one of those people. I'm not a retread they want back.
I think that's normal though. I have this weird. So I pinned on my staff. I was promoted to staff sergeant in the inactive reserve. And I had this recurring dream where I've been recalled to active duty, but nobody believes I'm a staff sergeant. And so like, everybody's like, shut up, sergeant. I'm like, I'm a freaking staff sergeant. Like, go away, take those rockers off and get back to me. Go on. Like, hey, that's my nightmare. That's my version of you forgot your cover. Yeah. Like, go stand duty. And I'm like, like that's my version.
Yeah. I still work them. So I may as well still be, I'm just a non-uniformed Marine, basically.
You're like a Lance Master Gunnery Sergeant or something now, aren't you?
It's something like that. I can give daps and hugs and call the battalion commander by his first name. That's what makes me different.
You missed the opportunity to say mean mugs and shoulder shrugs.
I didn't miss it. I knew you capitalized on me. I knew what I was doing. I knew you'd say that. So
did we settle the moral argument, guys?
I don't think we settled it. I think we addressed it, right? I mean, we probably went around a little bit of a circle.
But hey, as we wind down, I mean, we our goal is to tackle topics like this all the time and try to come at you with a very layman way with just three guys talking about this stuff. I think we're going to pick topics that are hard to talk about. We're going to pick topics that a lot of people avoid talking about in the Bible. And if you like things like that, then this channel is for you. And why don't you help us out and subscribe to this channel and hit that like button to help out our algorithms. We're gonna bring the content every week. If you have a suggested topic, maybe drop it in a comment. We might entertain that. You guys got anything?
I meant to talk about the Euthyphro dilemma, but it didn't.
What is that? Do it now.
All right. Well, so Socrates in the Platonic dialogue called Euthyphro.
Euthyphro?
Euthyphro. It's the name.
Stay let your soul glow.
Just let your soul glow.
I'm sorry. Say it again.
Euther's frog.
It's called Euthyphro because he's talking to a guy named Euthyphro.
Oh, that's the guy's name. Okay,
that's the guy's name. It's named after the guy.
Fucking
And so Euthyphro makes a remark about how like something was pious or impious, and Socrates asked him, what is piety? Piety is that which is loved by the gods. And so he asked him, do they love it because it's pious, or is it pious because they love it? And it's often this is often an objection raised by atheists to the divine command theory, the idea that something is moral because God commanded it, or that morality comes from God, because the observations that Socrates made was that first of all, the gods are not of one mind about what is moral or immoral. They're often immoral themselves. Zeus, the king of the gods, did some pretty bad stuff. He liked to rape maidens and father demigods on unwitting princesses and stuff, among other misadventures. But the gods are not of one mind themselves about what's right and what's wrong. So the question, if it's pious because they love it, that makes it arbitrary and capricious, and it could be something else depending on the moods and the whims of the gods. Or if they love it because it's pious, that means that there's a standard over and above the gods themselves that they're holding it to. And so what would that be? This is not a dilemma on Christianity, on monotheism, though. It's a false dilemma, because God himself, his nature, is that standard. I wouldn't say it's correct to say that it's righteous because he commands it, as if to say that he could have just on a whim commanded something else opposite of that, and that would be righteous, because God doesn't have whims. And but there is no standard greater than God himself to which he is bound. That standard is his own nature. And that kind of goes full circle to the moral argument itself, which is we all recognize a morality as an obligation to behave a certain way. And when you start unpackaging that obligation to whom, you wind up at God by definition. And if not God, then it makes it merely a social construct. So anyway, that's a good way to.
So yeah, that I actually had seen a meme about this, and I didn't realize what it was. I didn't know the formal dilemma that it was quoting, but it was something along those lines. I'll see if I can find it and share it. But I Googled it, one, to know how in the bloody hell to spell this guy's name. So for those that are interested, it's EUTHYPHRO. Euthyphro.
Yeah.
But it was restated by Leibniz, and he kind of restated it similarly, only instead of it being, the Roman gods kind of thing, it was just God. And it was essentially the same thing as, I just had it in front of me. Yeah, there it is. It's generally agreed that whatever God wills is just and good, but that remains the question whether it is good and just because God wills it, or whether God wills it because it is good and just. That was Gottfried Leibniz's restatement of the dilemma.
Who also invented calculus, which is
Leibniz.
Yeah, well, he and Newton invented calculus, which is also objectively, it's an objective system that is right or wrong.
Calculus.
Yeah, just to bring it back to my math analogy.
I don't pretend to understand calculus. I was told by a mathematician. The story's not important. It was a question about arithmetic, plus and minus and divide by. And I was asked, Matt, what's the answer to blah, blah, blah? And it was kind of complex. And I was like, I don't know. I don't do math that well. And this PhD in mathematics said, Matt, just so you know, until you get past trigonometry, it's not mathematics and it's just arithmetic. And I was like, well, then I don't know mathematics and I don't do arithmetic that well. How about that?
And you can have a Coke and a smile and shut
right. She was cool, so I wasn't mad at her. She said it with a smile, and it was a well-intended joke. I was just outside of Sandia National Laboratories, dog training with a whole bunch of PhDs in mathematics and like chaos theory type people. So yeah, it was quite the cerebral group of individuals I was with.
Nice.
But anyway. No, I think that's an interesting conversation, that your refroze dilemma.
Euthyphro.
I haven't used Stacifro since I was young, and it comes in a brown bottle. It's got black people on it. You wouldn't know about that.
Makes your hair straight and shiny.
It makes it soft, right? It makes it nice and manageable, especially trying to comb through the curls. You know what I'm saying?
What's that? What they call that? A neutralizer or what's the term for that stuff? Because I know what you're talking about. I mean, obviously, I've never used it, but
Right, yeah. Just let it shine through. Don't you gotta put the plastic over the couch,
right? When you get up, you get little head spots from where
we can't have that. But you got any last words there, Mr. Irvin?
I'm tapped out, man.
Matt?
I'm good.
No, I don't think so. I mean, like we said going into this was going to be a little weird. Give us feedback on this one. Do you guys want to hear us do stuff like this more often, or do you like our takes on modern things? Do you prefer listening to us talk about the Gaza Strip situation? Do you prefer our movie reviews? Like, what of our content's more appealing to you? Because we're kind of shooting all over the place trying to cover different topics. We're getting deep. We're getting we're diving into philosophy and big words and heavy topics. Is that what you want to hear us talk about? Do you want to hear us talk about, modern stuff or our takes on things? Like, give us feedback, because we don't know what's enjoyable and what's not. So do that for us. Help us dial it in or rein it in as it is.
I'm kind of afraid of what kind of answers we're going to get to that.
But we do know that we will be back next week. So,
absolutely. One way, I mean, regardless of whether you liked it or not, we're going to be back.
We're going to be back. So, so with that, please stay curious, stay enlightened, and we'll catch you next week.
Bye-bye.